del Carmen Fuentes Trueba. Ella permitió la libertad de la presunta culpable después de una serie de irregularidades en su detención.
Ahí está. Looks like we're starting. Parece que vamos a iniciar. Thank you all for being here. Gracias por estar. Once again, thank you all. My special invites a nuestros invitados especiales: Eric Suárez, Michael López, Arturo Solís, Jocelyn Velázquez, Lorena Salazar, y Gilbert ESP y Daniel Andrade y Carlos Córdoba. Gracias, amigas y amigos.
Buenos días.
Good morning, he says.
Me desvelé.
I overslept a little bit.
¿Por qué creen?
Because guess what?
Volvió a ganar México.
Mexico won again.
2-1 a Inglaterra.
2-1
Felicidades
against England.
a nuestros
Congratulations
representantes en el clásico
to our representatives on the World Classic World Baseball League and tournaments.
Integrantes del equipo mexicano. Se ganó ayer y hoy.
They won yesterday, so
a las 12 del día.
Today midday
Contra Canadá. Y
against Canada.
México. Eso está muy claro. Nada más que tengan.
I'm with Mexico, of course. That's really clear.
Las frases de Yogi Berra.
The phrases of Yogi Berra
Baby Ruth.
And Babe Ruth.
Yogi Berra es esto no se acaba hasta que se acaba.
Yogi Berra is this is not over until it's over. And
hay que aplicarse a fondo, como en todo, echarle ganas. No se puede hacer nada sin ganas. Para todo se necesita.
And we need to apply ourselves to everything. You can't do anything without applying yourself. This is what this team is showing us. And Babe Ruth used to say, it can't be defeated to those who don't know how to give up.
Dos máximas del béisbol.
Two great ones of baseball. They were doing good yesterday, the Mexican team. Very well on the pitching. The opening pitcher did really well. Family from Mexican origin. And I would be told that when the Benjamin Hill manager talks to them of the strategy that they're going to be applying, and above all, it motivates them to defend the Mexican colors, what they represent. Some of them already that are Mexican American, such as the pitcher from yesterday. Benjamin does it in Spanish and English. And they already tell him, no, we don't want it. We don't want translation. We only want Spanish. that we understand them through our parents. And that's really important. And hopefully that they do well against Canada. And that they go to the next phase, second phase, semifinals. We wish them the best. Let's go to the Wednesday section. There's a lot on the lies, but it's just a show. It's just a small part. They say that when the statistics are handled pretty well, with one proof or one show is just about enough to know what's going on. Much less the journalists, they don't say much. They need to keep quiet. They don't need to say anything because they might get fired. And those famous journalists, the ones that earn a lot of money, in a real sense, they're not really journalists. They're publicists. Because journalism is a noble job that implies ethics, honesty, truth, and it's really far from the lucrative side. Has nothing to do with marketing and the selling and the buying and the renting of ways of thinking per se and of conscience. Has to do more with dignity, more or less, but let's see how we're doing. With your permission, Mr. President, good morning to all representatives of the media and all that see us through the digital platforms, networks. Let's start. They make out and lie that Venezuelan soldiers come to reprehend Mexican soldiers, and it shows where they arrived to the Mexican airport, and Mexican military personnel receives them. A lot of journalists against this government, they publicize a lot of lies. We can see the Sergio Sarmiento, Joaquín López Dóriga, and Juan Carlos Sanz, amongst others, that we know that they are reproducing these lies, the ones that follow these narratives to say that Venezuelan military go to Mexico with the mission to pursue everybody that is against the regimen of López Obrador. That funny and that vile ended up being that the armed forces were in Mexico to participate in the international Chimatlali game that was from the 3rd to the 12th of March, where students of military of 9 countries to measure their physical tactical, and ethical measurements. Aside from Venezuela, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, US, El Salvador were also there, Honduras, República Dominicana, and of course, Mexico. And it wasn't enough, thanks to the social networks, that actually said the truth. As always, the social networks that said the truth and what it was about. And speaking about Ovidio, about the solicitation to extradite him to the U.S., for this, Ovidio Guzman said not to be the son of Chapo Guzman, nor being the one that the U.S. wants. Immediately, the opposition and media started saying lies and started sending all these mediatic shows, whether it was digital or in print, such as newspapers, Animal Político, Financiero, Código Magenta, and the list keeps going. This was supposedly processed by narco-trafficking, and the commentaries of conductors of radio and television set in the doubt that whether the detainee was the one that we were looking for. In this case, of course, Ovidio Guzman. Amongst the communicators that were setting the doubt, Héctor de Maleón, that assured that the real video was the one that the President Lopez Obrador communicated. We'll leave it at that, and in the screen we could see who sent that lie, and to these there was a lot more. Conversation, of course, in social networks. Felipe Calderón declared that there is political persecution against him, which is false, and he knows that. Felipe Calderón doubts about the verdict and says he is a victim. He says he is a victim to a political persecution against him, which is really false. But let's see the video where he is in Spain and declares to be a political enemy, and of course this is all related to Genaro Garcia Luna's situation, to export cocaine and traffic cocaine. I am a man of laws, and of course I respect the decisions of the tribunals when they act, when it comes to the rights. I do have a lot of doubts because I would have waited to see all the evidence that supposedly the prosecution had, and this was all based on criminal and confessed criminals, that the majority of them we pursued, captured, and extradited. You also commented that the declaration and the decision, well, it's evident there is a clear persecution in a political way against me, and that decision is being used by the government, Mexican government, against me. Well, look at it. We want to remind everybody that this declaration is part against doubting about the verdict that was given in the U.S. Social media and conventional media and all that are against this government are with this president. And at the end, I want to show you a video dedicated to the attacks and fake news against Mexico through communication, media, and political members. Legislators and conservative media have started saying a false campaign against Mexico with the lying axis. One, it's false that fentanyl is only produced in Mexico. Fentanyl was approved by the administration's of Food and Beverages, FDA, and it was in 1970 when this use was started. Fentanyl is an analgesic of opioid derivation as morphine and oxycodone that still is legal in the US with different brands. Such use and abuse has generated the crisis of opioids in that country. According to CDC, in between 99 and 2019, 500,000 people died because of an overdose, and in 2022, approximately 70,000 people perished because of overdosing of fentanyl. And the U.S. government recognizes, and that Mexico, it is not the only country, aside from the black market, that traffics in the American continent. That country identifies two different routes directly from China and the one China, Mexico, US, where the precursors of fentanyl coming from China, majority, and some coming from the American Union, are utilized or combined with other drugs for other trafficking in the US. Number two, it's false that the Mexican government is not fighting the traffic of fentanyl and other drugs. The seizures of drugs, of fentanyl especially, have increased significantly through this administration. We got 1,049% more of the seizures of fentanyls from 14 to 18. Methamphetamines have increased as well for 128% of crystal methamphetamine, and the cocaine is added to 628% more compared to 2008 and 2012. And the laboratories that have been destroyed, 58% more from 2012 to 2022. There's been thousands of tons seized for this government, and it's false that the Mexican government actually protects the cartels. We have stopped and detained more than 68,000 people related to this drug, 59% more than the 2014-2018. Most of them sticking out of Cartel del Pacífico, Ovidio Guzmán from Cartel de Sinaloa, and Nueva Generación as well. That's all, Mr. President. Look, two things that I consider them being important. First, about the fentanyl. When we got to the government,
los puertos estaban a cargo de la Secretaría de Comunicaciones. Y para poner orden,
this was all in charge of the communications department, and to avoid contraband, the inbound of drugs, it was decided that the ports were handled by Secretary of Marines, because there was ports such as Manzanillo, Lázaro Cárdenas, practically overtaken by delinquents. You can apply the sentence
de plata o plomo.
of money
Por eso decidimos
or
que el
bullets.
manejo de los puertos iba a estar a cargo de la Secretaría de
Money
Marina,
or lead.
como las aduanas fronterizas a cargo de la Secretaría de la Defensa.
That's why
Eso
Secretary of Defense had to be there.
ocasionó
This, of course,
oposición.
created opposition.
Inclusive fue uno de los motivos por los que me presentó su renuncia.
This is one of the reasons why Secretary of Communications, Ingeniero Jiménez Espriu, solicited his renouncements
de manera muy
in a very honest and frank way.
me dijo, yo no estoy de acuerdo con esto,
He said, I'm not okay with this because I feel that this is militarizing the country.
Y lo respeto mucho,
and I respect that a lot.
Pero,
but
era muy importante
it was really important
el que se hiciera este cambio.
That this change was made.
Él actuó de acuerdo a
He acted, of course, according to his criteria, his convictions.
Yo también.
And I will do as well.
Como tengo la responsabilidad,
since I have the responsibility to be in charge of the government, I took that decision.
Y hemos avanzado.
And we've advanced.
Fue buena la decisión. Porque
the decision was okay.
Hemos podido
because we've been able to
muchísima droga
seize a lot of drug.
Incluso en las aduanas marítimas y en las aduanas,
especially in the customs office,
se han incrementado los ingresos.
The increment of income
Es decir, está
have gone up,
bien.
Meaning that
Además,
it's working good.
La Secretaría de Marina con COFEPRIS,
aside from the COFEPRIS and Secretary of Marines, have been working conjointly to order the importation of fentanyl
que viene fundamentalmente
that comes fundamentally
de Asia.
from Asia.
Antes,
Before,
lo tenemos probado,
it's been proven that fentanyl would arrive to the supposed laboratories, clandestine laboratories. They would be allowed to get the import, and the fentanyl would be used to traffic and introduce it to the U.S. Laboratories, of course, ghost laboratories that would solicit their income of fentanyl, because fentanyl, of course, is a drug to control pain
intervenciones quirúrgicas,
in surgeries.
Se utiliza el fentanilo.
It's an analgesic that is used for there. And
hacer una revisión de los importadores.
And there was a revision that was made.
Se depuró el número de importadores.
The number of imports was minimized.
Requisitos para otorgar el permiso.
And there was requirements established to get permits to use the fentanyl with ends, medical ends.
Ahí estamos.
And that's where we are.
También
Also, it's to be noted that fentanyl
para droga,
for drug,
para el narcotráfico,
for narco trafficking,
se ha estado
has been
combatiendo y ha crecido muchísimo el número de decomisos.
combated, and a lot of seizures have been promoted. There's the numbers of how much we've seized. Maybe we can put that on. It's really important that it's known that 1 kilo of fentanyl equals to 1 million doses of that drug. And we've seized, in the time that we've been working, 6 tons, as ever before. Aside from what we're doing in Mexico, of course, I would say that even more than in the U.S., above and about this
utilización de una droga que es lo más adictiva y dañina que puede haber.
Of the scourge of the drug.
Mucho en México. Ahora
we're doing a lot against it here in Mexico. And now the politicians, Republican politicians, and some even Democratic in the U.S., that haven't done anything, because the distribution over there of this drug, and it's not known really of any seizures or detentions to those who dedicate themselves to distribute it, and not even any newscasts are talking about the damage that this fentanyl causes. But it's really easy to blame Mexico in an unjustifiable way because of political deals, hypocrisy, and they've actually dared to say that if we don't control the entry of fentanyl from the U.S., that, as it's been said before, it doesn't only come in through Mexico, through the frontier Mexico-U.S., it comes in directly. And it comes in through Canada, from Asia. Well, they've even said that they're even going to start an initiative so the U.S. Army comes in and stops the narco trafficking,
violando nuestra soberanía. Eso nunca, jamás lo vamos a permitir.
That we're never going to allow, of course. But since we need to inform the U.S., we need to inform all the American people and the Mexicans living over there, so that they don't allow themselves to be manipulated. And if we've taken the decision of Mexico and the U.S., the consulate,
de esta situación. No están haciendo su trabajo.
And inform them about the situation so they can tell the people there that the legislators of the U.S., the authorities in the U.S., Republicans, are not doing their job. They're not tending to the causes. There's no attention for the young people in the U.S. Why is it then that the addiction? Why does the young person go for the drugs? Because they've got problems, basically. Not only in the U.S., but in all the world. But they're not really recognizing the problem of the separation of family, spiritual, cultural ways that we need to live with, because the youngsters, the young people feel unhappy, unsatisfied, alone, abandoned, of course. That needs to be taken care of in the same way that we're doing it in Mexico. Before, the only thing that used to be done would be call the youngsters ninis that don't work. But now here in Mexico, they have scholarships to go to school. The people that can't go to work or don't work, they are contracted and work as apprentice, and we tend to the young people so the gangs don't take them, the people from the organized crime.
Para nosotros la familia es la principal institución de seguridad social.
Because for us, the families are the major institution of Social Security. The U.S. needs to work on that a lot more. And with all due respect, rethink and replant that way of life, that the young people are adolescents and now they have to abandon their families. They have to go. I was proposing the people that came from the U.S. in a very respectful way. Why don't they, if a young person was in school, or that if a young person was with the family, instead of him abandoning at 18 the house, would stay a couple more years, and that the government would help that family. Because it's really important that the young guy is not alone. That he has love for a little longer, hugs, apapacho, as we say in Mexico, and a ample program of communication about that, with all these media that attacks and talk about the people that sadly die because of fentanyl. And why do these media don't inform about the causes and how to help so that this addiction is not there. Why am I talking about all this? Because I'm asking medical and scientific Mexican members to analyze the possibility that we can substitute fentanyl with medical ends for some other analgesic to stop using it. Hopefully that will be possible, because before there'd be other analgesics used, and so even though we have the control that we didn't have before about the inbound of the fentanyl for medical uses, now that it will be prohibited, there wouldn't be any possibility that it could be imported, and we can substitute with another medicine. Hopefully this is viable, with the compromise that with everything that comes in illegally and black market will still be fought. And if we do this in Mexico, so that the U.S. can also only use it for medical use, I'm going to tell you about the analysis, the results of this proposal. It's going to be open proposal, so that scientists, medical staff can inform us. We all know, of course, due to medical reasons, fentanyl is for the pain. When they do operations that are really painful, they're used. But of course, before, others would have been used. So let's explore that possibility. I wanted to let that be known. And the other one is that yesterday we commented about the El PAN political party had hired this Garcia Luna company, and just yesterday, PAN president recognized it. There's no other contracts with any companies of Garcia Luna. In fact, it's part of the persecution. Obviously, we didn't have any known companies with us, but this is all, of course, is trying to disprestige the opposition, and that is what the president has been saying. Without more, it was just that one contract of services of personnel, and that's it. There's no other contract. Well, now that they're starting to speak, I want to say, I want to ask them, what about the personnel situation? What are they talking about? What is he talking about? What was Garcia Luna doing then? Was he human resources or? It would be nice to know. For what was that company hired for? Because Garcia Luna was, as far as is what was in the trial, is that he was what we heard, he was involved in the bodyguard deal and the security. But human resources, really? There's information already. And the other thing is to invite Calderon to go ahead and defend openly Garcia Luna. And to present proof. And it doesn't matter if it's the tribunals in the US. When a conviction is on that one is acting with the truth and you fight for a just cause, to any adversary, above all, of course, dignity, and to repeat to him that he's not being persecuted. I said it yesterday. I reiterate it. If we were persecuting him, we would have denounced it. I've never said that he's been denounced in an international tribunal for the human rights. I was really clear, though, to the ex-presidents, only if the people approves of it, to follow them, to initiate investigation process. I presented in its moments a solicitation for a consultation with those ends, and the people did not participate on the quantity that the Constitution demands. 40% of the citizens, so that the consultation would be able. Yes, the majority were asking for a trial for the ex-presidents. I think it was 7 million that were asking for that, but 40% would have had to be participating. But of course, conservatives called to not vote. But of course, either way, we didn't get the percentage we needed, and we're abiding by that law, by that compromise. Nevertheless, if he feels that Garcia Luna is innocent, well, then he should face the Attorney General, and there's a good debate opening on that. That would be really helpful and healthy for the world and Mexico and the US, I think. Because no tribunal has to act in an unjustful way. Unjustifiable ways, and wherever there's an injustice act committed, there has to be a protest, and there needs to be a fight against injustices. For example, they need to free Sanch. That must not be forgotten. Sanch is in jail, and it's like having liberty imprisoned. Liberty of expression is jailed. And they don't talk about that. And even the most influential people, New York Times, for example, talked about some cables. And them, they didn't put them in trial. Assange, they did the same thing to give information out of communications of the U.S. government, New York Times and other, and they weren't touched. And Assange, yes, they haven't been jailed. The double speech, as always. The Hassan guy should be freed. So Liliana is up.
Pero no es el doctor Gatel, pero en fin.
Pero no,
Está usted,
estamos hablando de temas médicos, sí. Ahora ya hasta sí. Especialistas nos estamos volviendo.
Gracias, señor presidente. Muy buenos días.
Well, I wanted to speak with the Dr. Gatel. Dr. Gatel. Well, don't worry, I can answer some. About the tobacco, it doesn't matter if they're long, light, menthol, filtered, unfiltered. All of them contain at the end more than 4,000 cancer substances, and the people that are watching us now could be a reflection about the time that this nicotine takes to get to the brain after the first shot, when it's given on the first cigarette, in between 20 and 37 seconds, that this substance gets to the brain and starts stimulating. If we multiply it for 20 and 30, it's many times that the cerebrum is stimulated. This, in these 7 seconds, starts producing the addiction to the cigarettes. A cigarette box contains 20 cigarettes. And the Respiratory Institution of Tobacco in Mexico says that Mexicans are an occasional smoker, meaning that they work during the job a little bit and work during the food time or feeding time, and some socializing smokers, and they tend to spend 50,000 or 60,000 pesos per year, which could be used to acquire a property or a vehicle. It's also known that there are 68,000 deaths per year attributed, and in the world there are 8 million smokers, and it's average that 1% are non-direct smokers, but the family members are passive smokers that would secondhand smoke, that would also be acquiring some tumors. There are some signs, like such as cold sores that heal and the skin regenerates and it still comes out these cold sores. These are precursors to cancer that is coming from the heat and the contact with the mucus and mucus glands and membranes, and having these new smoking devices such as vapes and the degrees that they can reach, the heat can come up to 500 to 600 centigrade. And I'm telling you all this because surely, and many of the people, experts, no, this isn't something new. This is something that has been known for a while. Nevertheless, Judge Claudia Hurtado de Mendoza in the Nuevo León district allowed the suspension in favor of the exhibition of these products to a store denominated OXXO. It's known more or less that the OXXO model, if it's not a franchise, it's more or less of a renting type of store, such as families or groups, so that they can have some income. But this ruling from that court, all the OXXOs has started taking advantage of that.
Ha pasado de largo por estas tiendas, se siguen exhibiendo. Tuvimos en Pulso Saludable la oportunidad de preguntarle a varios de los expendedores de estas tiendas de conveniencia.
These smoking artifacts are still being promoted and shown, and even though that they don't have the protection from the court, they still show these items, cigarette items, smoking devices, and nowadays it's exhibited in a way that other stores don't. There's about 600 protection against this ruling, protection rulings, and I want to sensibilize the judges that this is being made because of a health situation. I know that this is something about authoritarianism, but I don't think that it's related with this word that is strong. But when you lose a lot of lives, nowadays it's known that cigarette starts to weaken the skin, and people that are thin and need to gain weight, they have a hard time because of the nicotine, and it's one of the main promoters of circulosis, and that the arteries are starting to harden, and this does not allow that the blood continues. There's a sort of pools of blood, and it can turn into a coagulant of the blood to be able to take blood to the muscles, and thus creating a heart failure or even brain failure. And I want to say in two parts, now that I have the opportunity to know what they're talking about, if they're going to go through COFEPRIS to make these verifications of the stores, and of course wanting to know your explanation on this. Well, I think with that clear exposition, there's not really much more to say. I congratulate you. We congratulate you for what you're doing in a professional way, that you're exposing this situation, and the message to sensibilize judges not to give these protection decisions and to take into account, as we've always said, the health of the people, that above all, above the marketing of the lucrative end, that needs to be tended. Health needs to be tended to. Health of the Mexican people. That's a nice way of acting.
Con la exposición que hiciste, pues ya no hay nada que decir. De todas formas, le vamos a pedir a el doctor Alcocer, al doctor López Gatell, que traigan para la próxima información que se da los martes, algo relacionado con lo que estás proponiendo tú, con lo que expusiste. Se los dejamos a ellos para que traigan una respuesta.
We're going to be mentioning that to the doctors so that they can come in on Tuesday and talk about that, what you've exposed here. And also a chemotherapy of a person that lives with cancer in the lungs can even cost 300,000 pesos. So these are resources that we can be destining to other health areas that have not been stopping to reach these patients, and the tobacco companies are not doing anything. And to exhibit and show these items, smoking items, that's why it's important so that they're not shown and demonstrated, because we're talking about these new generations, to take care of them. Yes, we're going to be looking into that, and so that the judges don't give these protection callings, and also calling to the company owners, because they can contribute a lot. A good company man has to have a social dimension, civical dimension, not just be thinking of the earnings. And so, we're left with that. If you want, on Tuesday, and they can give you an answer there. And on the second question, just about the fentanyl situation in the leaders of North America, Joe Biden said that 100,000 North Americans perish for the use and abuse of this substance. Last week, Elizabeth Sherwood Randall said that the White House assessor about the weapons and the fentanyl. I want to know if you guys got into any agreements, given that in a few weeks before I was able to speak with Evalinda Barron, Director of Commission Against the Addictions. She said that, in fact, Mexicans consumes the fentanyl, but it's not a national situation or as important. But the consumption in Mexico is not a priority. Otherwise, the crystal is. So, if you can tell us what was the agreements that you came with. The agreement was that we're going to keep working together, assisting so that fentanyl doesn't get to the U.S. through our frontier. And of course, we're doing that. There is a cooperation plan on that. But what generated discrepancies in the last few days, that with political proposals and reasons, some Republicans wanted to blame Mexico and even threaten with army military intervention. Very offensive and very hypocritical, because this is a situation of the two nations, of the two peoples, of the two governments. It's not to just blame your neighbor. It's about seeing what's going on, not just inside of your country. So that's why you're talking about, okay, so what do you guys do? What do you guys do? How do you combat narco trafficking, distributors of drugs in the U.S.? Because we don't know anything about that. How much is seized? Most important is what they're doing so that the young people, they decide or they opt to use drugs. How's the educational plan going? The diffusion of the information about how harmful the drugs are. What are the newscast medias doing so that the young people don't incline themselves to drugs? And what are authorities, the DEA, what do they do? Why is it that the boss of the DEA in Mexico was vinculated with narco trafficking in Mexico, and the only thing they did was fire him? And it was really quiet. I'm sure that newscasts didn't even mention anything. This is not a fake situation. It's not about good and bad. It's a simplest way, superficial way to see a problem. So we're talking about that we talked about that we're going to be doing a cooperation, but as well, and this is for all Mexicans, we have three priorities to confront the insecurity problem and violence. First, tend the causes, meaning that in Mexico, young people don't take the antisocial ways. And for that is that we are destining resources to well-being programs, that there's employments that the salaries are
que
just,
se atienda a los jóvenes,
that
que se garantice el derecho a la
young
educación,
people are
a
tended
la
to,
salud,
that
que
the
se combata la
guarantee of
pobreza,
health and education, and
que
to
se
combat
fortalezcan
the
valores
poverty,
culturales, morales,
cultural values,
espirituales.
moral, spiritual
Porque
values are
si
established.
algo nos ha
If
salvado
anything has saved us
frente a todas las calamidades,
to all these calamities,
nuestras culturas,
it's been our cultures,
las raíces profundas
the
que tenemos
deepened
en la
roots
cultura
that we have
mexicana.
in the cultural realm here in
Y
Mexico,
este país se fundó hace miles de
because
años.
this country was founded thousands of
Y
years
nuestros
ago,
antepasados
and our
una herencia de costumbres, de tradiciones, de hábitos buenos.
ancestors left us with
Uno de esos hábitos
good habits. One of
buenos
those good habits
es la fraternidad
is
en
fraternity
nuestras familias.
in our families.
Por eso
And
tenemos
so,
que evitar la desintegración
we
de
have
las
to
familias.
avoid the disintegration of the families.
Entonces, eso es lo primero,
So that's the first.
que los delincuentes no se
That
lleven
delinquency
a
don't
los
take
jóvenes, que no los enganchen.
the young people.
Y por eso las becas a
And
los
therefore,
jóvenes,
the
por eso
scholarships to the young ones.
construyendo el futuro.
That's why Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro
Eso es lo primero.
projects.
Lo segundo,
That's the first. Second,
a partir de atender las causas,
starting from tending to the causes,
que reforcemos
that we can reinforce
costumbres, nuestras tradiciones,
our ways, our
para
traditions,
que
so
no
that
aumente el consumo.
there's no increments on the consumption of drugs in the country.
Porque una cosa es el narcotráfico
Because one
y
thing
otra
is
cosa
narco trafficking
es el
and
consumo.
another is the consumption.
Y en efecto,
And
nosotros
of
no
course,
tenemos aquí
we don't
un
have
consumo
any consumption of
elevado de fentanilo.
elevated levels
Sí,
of fentanyl.
cristal,
Yes, crystal we do
pero
have
también muy
consumption,
localizado.
but really localized.
¿Y por qué no hay tanto consumo?
And how come we don't have a lot
No
of
ha crecido
consumption?
tanto el consumo del
How come it's not growing a lot?
¿Por lo que hace el gobierno? No,
Because of what the government's doing? No.
por nuestras tradiciones,
Because of our
por lo que
traditions.
hacen nuestras familias,
Because of what the families are doing.
por la manera como somos los mexicanos.
Because of the way we are as Mexican.
No hay
There isn't
actitud,
an attitude,
una afición hacia las drogas. No. Son ciertos lugares.
to the drugs. There's no really inclination for them here. There's some locations that are really clear.
Primero, no permitir el aumento en el consumo.
Not to allow the consumption.
Si nos aumenta el consumo, nos aumenta la violencia.
Because if we increase consumption, deaths will go up, crime will go up. So the third is to reduce the number of homicides. In the case of Guanajuato, of course, there you have a lot more consumption, right? Narco selling of narcotics. For some reason there was extended. The consumption extended. From there, gangs start fighting on that per market because of the selling. And that's why you get a lot of homicides. 70% of the homicides in Guanajuato are vinculated, related with drug selling. And there's actually less homicides in Sinaloa in comparison in Tamaulipas
que en Guanajuato. Inclusive, menos homicidios.
Even less homicides in Jalisco.
¿Dónde están las sedes de las organizaciones?
Where the organization offices are, if there's no
Consumo,
consumption,
hay menos homicidios.
there are less homicides.
Recapitulando, primero, atender las causas.
So retaking means to tend the causes.
Que no
Second, not allowing
que aumente el consumo.
to add consumption.
Y ahí tenemos que
And right there, we need to
uso de todo.
be able to do everything. Back up the young people, a lot of information spreading, dissemination of the information about that. Because if internal consumption goes up, homicides go up as well.
Desgraciadamente, la pérdida de vidas humanas. Aún cuando se trata de homicidios entre las mismas,
even when it's about
son seres humanos.
Homicides amongst the same gangs, it's still homicide, and we don't want that, of course. This, of course, is with not allowing corruption and impunity. Nothing about selling the job positions. Nothing about that Garcia Luna thing.
No aceptar.
Not to accept narco states as it was before.
Y también
cooperate
con Estados Unidos.
With the U.S.
Cooperar con Estados Unidos para que no entre droga.
Cooperate with the U.S. so that there's no drug coming in from Mexico to the U.S. But don't misinterpret it. Not that they want that to be the first of our responsibilities. We're going to be backing them up. We're going to be helping because of humanitarian situations. Yes. Solidarity. But we're not going to be their employees. They're going to come here and tell us, well, you're going to dedicate yourself only for this. That's not how it goes. We are free. We are sovereign. We have our own strategies. Before, that was the mistake of Calderón. That the doors were open to the U.S. and the government was set to the service of the agencies. They were the bosses. They would bring in armed helicopters with the Plan Mérida, take the picture and
con la entrega de armamentos, los embajadores.
and the ambassadors, of course.
Bueno, hay una foto ahí de García Luna con
There's even a picture around there with Miss Clinton, because that's what it was. And it's a little bit as to what they're planting. Cooperation. Even the guy from El PAN says, get with the DEA. Turn into police of the U.S. government. If in Mexico we're chosen to protect Mexicans, to take care of Mexican people. And of course, in the realm of nations, of course, we need to help each other out, but not submit to commands and even to strategies, failed strategies. How are we going to leave the DEA in charge of the security of Mexico when it's been more than demonstrated that they have been able to get good results? Or have they have any good results when it comes to combating drugs? No. And we're advancing, and we're reducing the number of homicides, tending to the youngsters. So your question is really good, because it helps us to understand what the role is of our governments. We're going to keep helping, assisting them, but not subordinating to them. And then the other one, the managing of weapons, or the weapons contraband. Yesterday, President Biden sent out a resolution for better control in the selling of arms, something that I appreciate and that is really good that he did. That he took this action, because where are the weapons coming from that the narco traffickers use?
Sin ningún control. Es un gran negocio. Y también para Estados Unidos. ¿Por qué no controlan, sobre todo, la venta de armas?
Why don't they control the selling of the high-powered weapons? And what do they do with that? I mean, what Biden did was great. 80% of the weapons that, high-powered weapons that cartels use here are 80% coming from the U.S. And there's absolutely no control. They can purchase machine guns they can purchase it in a supermarket, for example. So the situation is really interesting. It's really good that it's been ventilated, because before, Mexican authorities would be quiet. They wouldn't say anything. In the contrary, with Calderón, there was disagreements of the Fast and Furious to set in weapons to Mexico, supposedly to detect where these gangs were. Just imagine if Genaro Garcia Luna didn't know where the gangs were. According to the testimonies, he would hang out with them. So the operation was to bring in weapons, supposedly of contraband, with sensors or chips to monitor those weapons, and they can find out where these gangs were. So what happened was that the chips were removed, and they used them, of course, for their illicit activities. And with those same weapons, killed Mexicans and, of course, U.S. citizens. Investigation was done, and immediately they've forgotten about it. And here, same thing. Denying, they didn't know. When it was an agreement in between governments. And so it's really interesting that all this is known by the people. And of course, Mexicans know about this already. There needs to be more information in the U.S. And that thing about Marcelo was really good, because there's a lot of manipulation in the U.S. And this, what we're dealing with, is unknown. But now, the conference, a lot of people in the U.S. are watching. Millions. So, and finally, Mr. President, in the situation of the Tren Maya, I want to know if the Calakmul zone is known only for one pyramid, because it's really extensive. But when one is on the top, the guide, he says that the horizon is with Guatemala, and this is a really interesting location in between these two nations. I want to know if it's being thought of to amplify, and so the Mexicans can have an opportunity to get all the way over there and know that location. Yeah, that's a good question, because it has to do with our past, with the flourishing of Mayan cultures, and what we spoke about, a great past, civilizations that flourished there in Mexico. This assists us a lot to clarify that it wasn't the Europeans that brought this civilization in, or that they civilized us. That's not it. Mexico comes from afar, from way back, thousands of years back. And so, why don't you put the map of the train? That is really interesting. This is extremely interesting. Europeans, of course, invade us about 500 years ago. Even Tenochtitlan is founded 700 years ago. But Calakmul
hace 14 siglos,
almost 14
1400 años. O sea, Tenochtitlan 700,
centuries, 1,400.
¿sí?
En Calakmul,
1600, no, 1400 años. Siglo VI,
it's about
1200 años.
1,200 years.
No, 1400.
Okay,
Que es el
1,400.
6 de nuestra
Because
era.
it's in the 6th
2000 son
century.
1400 años.
So it's 1,400. And Tenochtitlan was founded
700 años.
700 years. So Calakmul was
Se funda
founded
en el siglo VI, pero
in the 6th
en lo
century.
que es el periodo clásico
But when
maya,
it's the Mayan, classical Mayan period,
ya había sido habitado
nevertheless, Calakmul had been
3 siglos
inhabited
antes de
3
nuestra era.
centuries before that.
A esos 1400
So to those
hay que
1,400,
sumarle
we need to add in 900 more.
estaríamos hablando de
We'd be
2300
speaking about 2,300 years of the existence of
¿Por
Calakmul.
qué no pones la pintura de 300 años antes
Can you put in the picture
de
where
Cristo,
300 years before Christ
que
of
son
Calakmul?
2300 años?
That is 2,300 years.
Esto es de hace 2300 años.
This is more than, or just about 2,300 years ago.
Pon la mujer del vestido transparente.
See if you can put the one with the transparent
La
dress.
belleza, el arte.
You can see the art. Look at
2300
that.
años.
2,300 years ago.
Los
Coming back,
europeos
the Europeans
que nos traen
that brought
la
us
civilización, que nos
to
civilizaron,
civilization,
según la historia
according to history, official history,
y occidental
and occidental,
y colonizante,
and colonizing,
500 años.
500 years.
Y esto 2300 años lleva.
And this is about 2,300 years ago.
Porque este sitio que
Because this site,
termina el tren, se va a abrir, claro, va a ser con reservación, que lo vamos a cuidar, no va a ser así de entrada masiva. Desde luego, para todos, nada de exclusividades, pero lo tenemos que cuidar.
we need to take care of all this.
Es un templo que cubrieron con las nuevas, entre comillas, pirámides donde estuviste, que son del siglo VI de nuestra era, está abajo.
And these are from the 6th century, of course.
Yo entré,
I came in and
hay mascarones con estuco.
there are masks, stucco masks, and these murals. This is a jewel, basically.
No, lo tienen en otras partes.
This is not found in any other place. This is all art.
Lo cubrieron, lo cuidaron, lo protegieron.
They covered it, protected it.
Esto pasa también
This happens, of course,
Teotihuacán.
also in Teotihuacan,
Teotihuacán, como se le quiera.
or however you want to say it.
También debajo de el templo,
Underneath the temple
del sol, de la luna,
of the sun and moon,
vestigios,
there are relics
culturas anteriores.
of ancient cultures.
Decía un historiador, arqueólogo, cuando le preguntaron, oye, ¿cuántos sitios
There was this archaeologist that was asked, how many archaeological sites are there? He said one. They asked him, what do you mean? Yeah, Mexico. It's that everything in Mexico was populated. The whole thing. Why don't you put on the map?
Teníamos, por cuestiones de los
We had limits. Because of the limits, of course, back then they didn't exist. This, of course, is the limit of Mexico with Guatemala, and you got Belize here. But that, of course, didn't exist. Mayan nation was developed. Honduras, Guatemala, Campeche and Peninsula. In this way. So what was happening was, and how interesting about the exploration work that is being done in Tren Maya, that when we liberate this whole section with the right of way and jumping on all the obstacles of the supposed environmentalists and our adversaries. These are 4 locations. You got Carso and Escarcega to Caquimil. You got Indy here. That is another company to Izamal. And from here on, you got Ica in Cancun. So then we divided the sections, the well-being secretaries, all of us, all the secretaries are there working on this. And it ended up being that I asked Director of Anthropology, Diego Prieto, to help us out in this section of Calquimil to Izamal, coming in through Mérida, thinking that we were going to find the biggest archaeological finds, vestiges, and we found about 3,000 of them. And we recuperated. They're in a museum in Mérida. We recovered those pieces. But we thought that here, this section, this is Calakmul, this is where you were, somewhere around here. From here to Escárcega, that has to do with limits with Guatemala, 10,000 vestiges. We had to do 21 changes from sections. completely
poblado.
populated.
Toda esta zona
All this zone
de los antiguos mayas.
of the ancient Maya.
Más
In addition to the peninsula.
entonces tu pregunta
So your question
es cuando
is
se empezó a concebir lo de la ruta, dijimos, y se lo propuse al presidente de Guatemala.
and I proposed it to the to the president of Guatemala. He had a disposition, but
Intervinieron otros factores.
there was other factors in there. Because what I told him was that in Triunfo, Tabasco, the limit here, and it's the divisional line there, and it's direct. Instead of us going through there, we can grab on from this one, the whole line, and then we can head up. And head up on to get to Calakmul from this part, from the back, because here, from on the Guatemala side, in a straight line, there was an archaeological site that was called the Mirador, that is splendid, just as Calakmul. But in a direct line, you have Pical, and then you got Flores here. And so, Guatemala was in their best interest to, if we were going to be working on here, a stop there, right in El Mirador, that is 3-4 kilometers from the line, and then they could do a way, because it's a reserve, need to take care of that, to communicate Tikal as they used to communicate before the archaeological sites, and Tikal, Mirador, and Calakmul. But it turns out that there was this problem, a limitation problem with Guatemala with Porfirio Diaz. And there was actually some international arbitration. And they were talking about foul play and things like that. And that this section was the one of the conflict, above all because of the woodworkers, that they used to dedicate themselves to extract the oak wood from Chiapas and La Candona, and there was a problem of limitation. We were almost enclosed to have one war against Guatemala because of that. So in Guatemala, there was, even when in international organisms, the reason was given to Mexico, the right was given to Mexico when this was defined. When I planted this with the president, it was in our best interest because it was a right of way on our side to put in a railway system. When I told him about it, he said, well, let me analyze it, and he ended up saying no. It was going to generate problems. You know how there's opposition everywhere, and they were going to accuse him to be accepting the old limitations. And that's why that wasn't done. But here we're doing it. I'm telling you that so we can resolve here. We have 150 archaeologists, and brigades
tenemos de aquí
from
acá
here to here,
7 subtramos.
7
El primer
sections.
subtramo
First one of them being,
está a cargo de la
and
gobernadora
is in charge of the
Mara
governor,
de
Mara,
Quintana Roo.
from
Y
Quintana
tenemos
Roo,
otro subtramo de la gobernadora Laida Sansores acá.
and another section with Laida Gonzalez.
Los 5 subtramos,
And in the middle of this, the 5 sections,
Mariana Montiel y María Luisa Albores,
2
y
subsecretaries
3
and
subsecretarios,
3 subsecretaries,
más
plus
ingenieros militares,
military
oficiales
engineers,
de la defensa,
defense
y
officials, and archaeologists
que son los que están
that are the
llevando a cabo,
ones that are
todos los
putting this
trabajos
on,
de libramiento, aún cuando ya cambió el trazo, de todas maneras estamos rescatando vestigios arqueológicos.
even though
Pero
that we're still
esta pregunta
rescuing
es
vestiges,
importante porque el desarrollo de la gran cultura
because
maya
your question is really important, because the development of the Maya culture is all in Central America.
no habían los límites
There wasn't any territorial limits that we have now.
Ah. Todavía estamos en eso.
Can't hear the question, but he's answering, yes, we're still working on that, we're advancing. I guarantee you that it's the most important work that is being constructed in the world. In the world.
No hay una obra así. Porque son 1554.
Because it's 1,554 kilometers.
De Cancún.
It's from Cancun to Mexico City.
Línea recta. Y,
in a straight line.
De Mérida.
And from Mérida to Chetumal, it's 2 ways, electrified.
Y, en el resto es diésel de bajo
and the
azufre,
rest is diesel with low emissions, non-contaminant.
que es el que se va a distribuir ya en toda la península y en el sureste.
That is going to be distributed in the whole peninsula and in the southeast. This, of course,
es el futuro
is the future
del sureste.
of the southeast.
Es lo que le va a permitir a los
This is
pobladores
what the
5 estados,
population of 5 different states,
sus ingresos,
their
a
income
futuro, las nuevas
in the future,
generaciones.
the new
Aquí están
generations.
llegando
Because this is what we
30 millones
are having 30 million
de turistas.
of tourists,
Y con el tren van a bajar,
and with the train they're going to
se van a internar.
go down
Y por acá también.
as well on this side.
Hay países en Europa que
There are
viven del
countries
turismo.
in Europe that live from tourism.
Entonces, el tren es
So then the train
el más grande
is the biggest
en ecología.
in
Estamos
ecology.
hablando de las reservas
We're talking about the
de
reserves
flora, de fauna
of
más importantes de México y de las más importantes
green
del mundo,
areas,
que es selva tropical.
the most important in the world, of tropical
Es turismo
reserves, tourism,
y es arqueología. Dicen los especialistas en turismo, tren temático. No,
the
es así.
people say it's a thematic train.
Es muy integral. Y si
It's not
de
really
esos
a
30
thematic
millones
train.
logramos que el 10% utilice
If we can get 10% of the people to use the train, it's all going to be worth it. Because we need to worry about
las culturas prehispánicas,
the pre-Hispanic cultures, of the old region population, but of course with the new population nowadays. So now that when their surveys are done, that the supposed environmentalists don't know, when there are surveys done or questioning, the majority is in favor because they feel proud. First is the recuperation of a past, glorious past, and of course these are income of a location that has been abandoned for a long time. Amongst other things, there wasn't any water here. There was barely an aqueduct here, from here to here, and we're making a new one in an investment of 2,500 million Mexican pesos. There's not going to be lack of water anymore. All of this is populated from way back of the culture, flourishing Mayan culture. All of this, even all this part here, Quintana Roo was abandoned. Quintana Roo had 1,400.
Era la Siberia tropical. Aquí estuvieron presos los dirigentes de la huelga de Río Blanco.
14,000 inhabitants in the Rio Blanco location in Veracruz.
Aquí nada más estaban
here, for example, we had the Mayan, indigenous Mayan, defending their land. There's a great repression here. Huerta was here before his felony, before ordering the assassination of Madero, burning towns. Acumal, for example, Huerta burnt that. Just imagine what happened. This is now paradise. It's the most beautiful zones. This island here, Porfirio Diaz gave it to the Justo Sierra's brother. As well as all this Chetumal area, to the son of Bernardo Reyes, was the owner of all this. But not even, they didn't even use the lands. There were small camps. It was abandoned. Starting from 1960s, 1970s, there's a lot of colonists start to arrive from Mexico, Michoacan, and start giving lands to them. All this, Campeche right here, Quintana Roo. People from Michoacán, Estado de Mexico, Guerrero, Jalisco, Veracruz, Chiapas. They came there. They went there because they got land. My grandfather is buried there. Was a peasant in a place called Constitucion. So then
eran tierras
there were these
muy difíciles
difficult lands to work because of lack of water.
Y se fueron poblando.
They started populating
de colonos, bueno, todo.
their lands of colonies.
Empieza a darse a conocer a principios de los 70.
This barely started to get known with these settlers
de los hoteles en Cancún, en los 70 del siglo pasado. Entonces, es un
on the 70s.
Proyecto para
So it's a project for the future.
Adelante y adelante.
Okay, go ahead. Good morning, Mr. President. Carlos Dominguez. To ask you about what's happening in the refinery Pemex in Houston. Yesterday, there was a lot of call about a fire in the refinery, and 3 weeks ago as well. I don't have any information about that. Surely that there could have been an accident, of course, but the refinery is operating okay, and there's a productive capacity of up to 80%, processing 340,000 daily barrels of crude oil, and it's a little bit over 80% of capacity, and even with utilities, it could be that maybe an accident happened yesterday, but has a maintenance program, a very strict maintenance program, and they were, all the workers, all the administrative personnel was there because they've done it really good. So it could be, but I hadn't gotten a report yet. Maybe it wasn't something big, because otherwise they would have told me. And about retaking a situation that I brought in 2 weeks ago, I'm going to read it out to you. I had the opportunity to let you hear an audio that is in social media where there's a supposed defending human rights activist, but we all know that he is reputed in the world that he fakes to be a human rights activist, but he actually is helping the cartels. He's never defended a legitimate victim. After you all hearing the audio that proves he's with the delinquents, a lot of media gave airway to try and clear an honor that he's never had, and to accuse that my telling that was wrong is a straight lie. But not only that, last week, a representative came here last week and tried to accuse their government to spy to somebody that was qualified as an innocent civil person that is actually working with the cartels. You can ask the people in Nuevo Laredo that we know, and we are tired of them. And that's why in this occasion, Mr. President, I would like to present more information that reinforces this narrative that this supposed good citizen is not good, and that if for some reason in some time was given some information to help the cartel that he works for, and this information is all over the social media, even before your term of president. And I want to take advantage of this space to Artículo 19 or Carmen Aristegui, Azucena Oresti, López Dóriga, Ciro Gómez Leiva, and in last week that he was qualified as a good person, and defended him for a cartel of the drugs, maybe that they can understand the damage that they do to Tamaulipas to push these types of information against our armed forces, and taking advantage to ask you what's the message that is being given to the people that are in the armed forces and whom in the future would want to form a part of it when these types of people are using resources and could be lied to them and hurt them. The only thing that they're looking for is to come back to their privileges and to do assistance with Raimundo Ramos and complete their work so that everybody is in doubt as to what they're really doing, supposedly working for the people that they pledged allegiance to. I want to play you another video here of the detention of 2015 of the boss of Cartel del Noreste, Ramírez Moreno, alias El Rama, where he confesses what the activity is of this supposed guy, Raimundo Ramos. I'll put it in and let it be known that here there's people that are lying. This is an activity. This is an activity that's you can put it in the you can put it on the social network, right? Yes, it's already there. But look, Carmen Aristegui and Artículo 19 and all of those you mentioned, they're against us. So anything that goes against us, of course, they're gonna show it, even if it's a lie, even if it's something dumb, even if it's fake. Well, we're looking at how López Dóriga, Loreto Mola, Sergio Sarmiento are talking about that there's Venezuelan military to repress the people. How weird is it that military now are coming in and they're not informed or they're not careful of knowing or finding out that this is an event that a lot of armies do, Venezuela, US, Canada, Mexico, amongst others, and they grab from there because they're mad. I'm not going to say hate, of course. They're just mad. So now with this situation, it's the same thing. Because they're not accepting, they don't believe that we're not spying on anybody. How are they going to accept? How are they going to believe us if they've already judged? I lie. I'm authoritarian, militarist. They have that idea now. It's that's how they get justified. It's their slogan. Towards their own conservative people that exists, and it's big. It's about 25 million that have that conviction conservative conviction,
que son además
and that
respetables.
they're respectful people,
Hagamos lo que hagamos,
that whatever we
no
do,
los vamos a convencer.
we're not going to convince them.
Yo ya, desde que estábamos en la lucha
Ever since we've been in the
para la
fight
transformación,
to
cuando
transform the
encontraba yo
country,
una gente así,
when I would find somebody like that,
le decía, estás bien,
I would tell them, that's fine,
sigue tu camino, ahí vas.
just keep going.
No me voy a poner contigo
I'm not going to get into an
a
argument
discutir porque no te voy
because
a
I'm not
convencer.
going to convince you.
Ya les platiqué lo que sucedió una vez en un avión.
I've already told you about an airplane where the pilot invites me to the cabin,
Y que voy, ya estábamos aterrizando en la ciudad. Y
we're
empieza a
almost about to
decirme,
land, and starts telling
pues
me,
yo,
well,
no coincido con muchas cosas de usted.
I don't
pero
coincide with a lot of things
lo
that
que
you
sí no
say,
acepto,
but what I don't accept,
lo que sí
he said,
rechazo completamente
what I do
es
renounce to is El
son
PRI.
unos corruptos.
They're a big corrupt
Y
party, and so on,
Y
he was telling me.
me decía, y yo ya cansado también de
And I was
decir,
tired of all
quería
this
hablar, yo quería ver
tours. I didn't
cómo
want
pasaban
to
la noche.
talk. I
Invitaron
just wanted
varias
to
veces,
see
estuve
how they would land.
en las cabinas, ¿no?
I was in the
Muy
cabins.
interesante el aterrizaje.
It's really interesting how they land.
También hay una sillita que tienen en
They
medio,
would put in a chair that they have in the middle,
y me mandaban a invitar
and they would invite me
de,
to be there with the pilots.
con las sobrecargos, ¿no? Muy amables. Y bueno, sí, cuando ya vayamos llegando, voy a,
When
y ahí va yo. Y esa vez
we would arrive, okay,
nos
and they would
corruptos,
start
esto.
talking about corruption, and
Yo me quedaba callado.
I
¿Y
would
usted
stay
qué
quiet.
opina?
And what do you think? They would ask me. I said, well,
Tú eres simpatizante del PAN.
you are El PAN
Te quedas.
partisan, right?
Te voy a decir que son lo mismo,
I'm going to tell you it's the same thing.
los del PRI y los del PAN. Vamos a llegar a un aeropuerto ahorita.
We're going to get to an airport right
¿Qué
now
hicieron los del PAN?
that El PAN did.
11,000 millones de pesos.
11,000 million
Fox.
Mexican pesos.
Y se
Terminal
robaron
2 with
la
Fox.
mitad del dinero.
And they stole half of that money.
Pero, ni modo
But we can't do much
que yo te convenza, porque tú
to convince you, because you
lees a Sergio Sarmiento, ¿no?
read Sergio Sarmiento,
Escuchas a López Dóriga, o sea,
you listen to López Dóriga.
¿para qué hablamos?
Why speak?
Sigue tu camino, ahí la llevas, vas bien.
Keep going. You're doing good.
Y ya. Digo, ya me voy porque voy a buscar
And I
mi
tell them,
maleta.
well, I'm going to go because
Me fui,
I'm going to look for my
buscar mi maleta, mi asiento,
baggage.
saco mi maleta.
I got my
Y
bag.
cuando salgo,
And when
me
I
estaba
came out,
esperando casi en la puerta,
he was waiting for me in the door almost. He said, hey,
con un papel.
gave me a
¿Puede
paper.
dar un autógrafo?
Can you give me an autograph from my father?
Porque mi papá
Because my dad
admira mucho.
admires you a lot.
Sí, ¿cómo se llama tu papá? Ya,
Yes, what's your father's name? So I sign it.
todo mi cariño y un abrazo. Digo, sí. A tu papá sí, porque tu papá es un hombre inteligente.
I send one to your dad because he's a smart man.
Porque a veces me encuentro.
And sometimes I find
Es que
some
usted
that say that it's that you are the idol of my
es el
mom.
ídolo de mi papá.
You are the idol of my father.
Tú estás pensando de otra manera.
So that means that you're thinking in another way?
Ahí me
Yes,
das un
and
abrazo
I always
a tu
answer,
mami, porque
you can hug and
es
send
muy inteligente.
your mom a
Ojalá
kiss.
estés
It's
con
very
ella.
smart. You're really lucky with the type of mom you have.
Todo, ya
But
no
all
puede
of
uno,
this,
pues,
you can't
cambiarlos, o sea,
really change them
a
anymore
estas alturas. Miren, te voy a poner
until now. Look,
de
I'm
ese
gonna
día
put in.
Yo
For
hablé
example, that
de que
day,
una cosa era la
I was
inteligencia
talking about one
que se
thing being
requería
the
para evitar la
intelligence
fuerza,
that was required to
para
avoid
combatir
force
a los
against and to
delincuentes,
combat delinquency.
más que se hace,
And
el
that
centro
is, of course,
de inteligencia
is the center of intelligence.
hace esa labor,
Do this
está
work.
reglamentada, está legalizada,
It's regulated,
solicita
legalized,
para intervenir un teléfono,
and to solicit, to intervene
autorización,
for cell phone,
Ministerio Público solicita
ministry,
que se
public
le
ministry
autorice
needs
al centro de
authorization
inteligencia
from Center of
que pueda intervenir un
Intelligence,
teléfono, se lo solicita a un juez.
and then a judge needs
Así es
approval.
como ser tú. Bueno,
That's how it was.
entonces hablo de que una cosa es la
And so,
inteligencia y
I
otra
talk
cosa es
about
el
one thing being the
espionaje.
intelligence, and another thing is being
Espionaje es lo
espionage.
que nos hacían a
Espionage
nosotros.
is what they would do to us
Lo que
back
hacía
then.
García Luna y lo que
What Garcia Luna used to do,
hacían todos estos
or
que
all these guys
ahora se
that are
convierten en
now
paladines de la libertad. Claudio X
turned
González
into
y a todos los que les paga Claudio,
supposed
porque les
assisting
promete
of
periodistas,
liberty. Claudio X Gonzalez, of course,
reciben
has
dinero.
journalists
Entonces,
that
su
receive
fundación, que
money
habla
from
de
their
esto,
foundation,
recibe
that
esa fundación
in return,
dinero
that
del gobierno de
foundation
Estados
receives
Unidos.
money from the U.S.
Bueno, cuando se genera esa polémica,
When that
que qué bueno que no
is
estabas tú,
generated, and that's good that you weren't there,
cuando se genera esa polémica, empiezan en las redes, ¿no?
all these
Porque vino una
social network
compañera a plantearlo. Empiezan en
things
las
start.
redes toda una campaña.
This whole
Todos,
campaign,
todos.
all of them,
En coro.
almost all together.
Un mensaje, un tweet.
And then there's this message,
A
there's
ver
a
si lo
tweet
encuentras, del que fue del director del CISEN
of who was director of
con
CISEN
Calderón,
with Calderon.
Valdés. Busca.
It was Valdez, if you could find it.
Creas. ¿Cómo enseñan el cobre?
How they show what they're made of.
Este señor era
This guy
el de inteligencia y espionaje.
was part of the intelligence and espionage of CISEN.
Esas son las siglas. ¿Cómo es el CISEN en centro qué?
How do you say CISEN? What's it stand for?
Inteligencia. Ahí estuvo, bueno, ahí estuvo García Luna, ahí estuvo
Garcia Luna was there.
que fue procurador y luego ministro de
That was district attorney Medina Mora,
Tello Pion,
Tello Pion.
bueno, muchos personajes
A lot of personality.
ahí. Pero Velázquez
I think it was Velázquez as well.
o Valdés,
Que Valdez.
le hacía las encuestas y sigue haciendo.
He would do the surveys for Calderón
Peña.
and then Peña.
Y después de hacerle las encuestas a
And after doing
lo
the
nombra
surveys to
el
Calderón,
CISEN.
Calderón puts him in El CISEN.
Y pues está todo el tiempo en que está García Luna.
And he's always saying that Garcia Luna is the one that is on there.
Bueno, viene la polémica esta de hace unos días
So then the
y van a ver
question about a few days ago, and you'll see what I put on there.
me trata de inexperto,
He tells me that
que yo no sé
that I need expertise, that I don't know
cuál es la diferencia entre
what the
espionaje
difference is between espionage and intelligence gathering.
Claro, el experto es él,
Of course, the expert is him,
pero en
but
corrupción,
in corruption, of course,
él es experto
he's expert on that.
en simular, porque
In simulating,
siendo experto
Because being an expert,
nunca se dio cuenta de lo que hacía García Luna.
he never realized what Garcia Luna would do.
Él es, o eso, él es, mire.
That's the one right here. So there it is.
Querer justificar el espionaje
To want to justify the legal espionage that the army did
a Raimundo Ramos, es el señor que te refieres,
to Raimundo Ramos,
afirmando que no era espionaje,
affirming that it wasn't espionage, that it meant of intelligence, only exhibited or showed the ignorance of López Obrador. In 4 years that he's been a president, he'd know the ABCs of intelligence. Well, I want to be ignorant then.
Bueno, solo para aclarar, presidente, la mayor divulgación de información que supone que este sujeto opera para el cártel del noreste es anterior a su gobierno. Lo único que se divulgó de su posible
the only thing that was shown was a call that we can refer that it wasn't before your government because of the context of what they're speaking about. Yes, but that's good. And the message to the army, well, that they're in their right to express themselves and that they can have trust in that there are no actions of pressure. The government that I represent is not subject to blackmailing or lies. We are always acting with legality and justice so that they can be trustful that if their family members are innocent, if they didn't commit any delinquencies or any crime, they're going to be listened to, or if they're in jail, they're going to be freed if they didn't commit any crime. Because we don't create any crimes.
Postura, presidente, también sobre el posterior a los hechos ocurridos en Matamoros de estos 4 ciudadanos norteamericanos.
And about the Matamoros situation, about these 4 Americans, the governor, Cabeza de Vaca, puts up a video practically in a joking way, says that your government, it comes to be that your government was safer, jokingly saying, and what was happening, the crisis that was in that state. So, about that, Mr. President, and what is your administration doing to assist the reinforcement of the frontier and so that this doesn't happen again? Look, in Tamaulipas, citizens of Tamaulipas, Tamaulipecos, they're an example of good citizenship because they knew how to resolve the situation of the bad government that there was there by peaceful ways and democratical ways. And now they have a governor, honest governor, a good guy, a person that we have trust in, and that is a guarantee. To have a good governor, Américo Villarreal is a good governor, a good citizen.
No es una gente mafiosa ni de malas entrañas.
He's not a mafioso. Américo Villarreal is a humanist. Right, correct, righteous, as the people in Tamaulipas deserved.
Tamaulipas y su pueblo, porque el pueblo de Tamaulipas
because Tamaulipas
merece un mejor
people
destino. Entonces,
deserves a better way.
eso es lo que yo puedo decir.
And that's what I can say.
¿Cómo manejó el gobernador la crisis?
Under your perspective, how did the governor manage that? Very good, I think.
Tan es así
Well, it's so much so that
que aquí estábamos
we were here
en la mañana y él me habla para darme la información
in the morning, and he calls me to tell me the information. You know what Lopez Obrador said?
de que ya sabíamos
That we already knew,
y que fue armado.
and that it was all orchestrated. How they're just of the mounting things and orchestrating things. That when Governor of Tamaulipas, Lopez Obrador said,
Ya era una cosa que habíamos planeado.
It was something that we had planned, supposedly.
Y fue algo totalmente espontáneo.
And it was really something really spontaneous.
Ni modo, o sea, así son las cosas.
That's how things are.
No enojarnos.
Not to get mad.
No hay que enojarse.
Let's not get mad because
Haciendo las cosas de buena fe.
we're doing things out of good faith. Let's go have some breakfast. Tomorrow you're going to be the first one. And even if there's emotional mutiny, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, well, thank you so much for being here. Gracias por estar con nosotros y compartir un ratito, un tiempo con su canal AZTECRON Mexico for You, México para ustedes. Estamos grabando y estamos retransmitiendo las mañaneras todos los días para ustedes. A veces, algunos días he fallado por cuestiones médicas, pero siempre vamos a estar con todos y todas ustedes. Saludos a nuestras invitadas y invitados especiales, a toda mi gente hermosa, Ede, Miriam, Jennifer, gracias. Y claro, pues a los invitados especiales, Daniel Andrade, Eric Suárez, Michael López, Arturo Solís, Jocelyn Velázquez, Lorena Salazar, Gilbert ESP, Carlos Córdoba, Miriam, Ana y Jennifer. Gracias, amigas y amigos, cuídense mucho. Un servidor, Ángel Ramírez, para AZTECRON Mexico for You. Gracias, nos vemos mañana tempranito en la siguiente mañanera del presidente de México, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Thank you very much for being here. We'll see you tomorrow morning again for another conference, live conference of Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Bye-bye now.